Now here to tell you about future headlines is Atlanta's mayor, the Honorable Shirley Franklin.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to eat. That was terrific. Chicken salad was good, right? Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you. It's my pleasure to come. I think I've been singing this song now for a few days, but I want to do it a little bit differently than I have in the last couple of days. The City of Atlanta has a chance, as mayor, I have a chance to present to the City Council, which I did Monday a week ago, in which case the focus of my presentation on the state of the city was a focus on the important work that we have completed or have started, but more importantly, the work that we have yet to do. And I'd like to take that same theme to talk about where we've come, which I think is pretty well documented, where we are, and then where we're going. The City of Atlanta has experienced tremendous new growth and development in a short period of time. I think record levels. When I came into office, we barely had 400,000 residents in the City of Atlanta. And our demographers say that we are now at 500,000. So in 5 years, we've had a net gain in population, the kind of gain that we haven't seen in 30 or 40 years inside the city limits. Even with that, however, we still have a persistent level of poverty that exceeds 20% among city residents. And that is not discussed very much, but it is certainly influences the kind of city that we have, and it is a target of ours to see if we can't reduce the poverty level. And my primary form of there are two ways that the city gets involved in that. One, through an aggressive outreach program for locally based businesses so that they might hire locally based people in our work. And secondly, with a heavy focus on education. And some of you have heard me talk about education before. I think most of us in this room would say that the single most important factor in our success, other than our parents, and other than our faith, has been our access to quality education at various points in our lives. So it seems to me that that worked for the kids of the 50s, which I am, and it's likely to work for young people in this new century. And somehow or another, we as a community need to find ways to uplift, upgrade, enhance public education in a way that the vast majority of young people are getting the kind of investment in their education that they can move forward. Good news, headlines, the Hope Scholarship is a big help. It doesn't pay 100% of what young people need to go to college or post-secondary education, but it is a good foundation. And building on that foundation with the investments in public education that we're seeing across the state, but specifically in the City of Atlanta, that is a place where we can make a difference. In addition, I've mentioned business opportunities, and the city has many business opportunities. There is no short supply of business opportunities. In fact, if you are in the business of water and sewer, there's lots of business at the City of Atlanta. If you build airports, there's lots of business at the City of Atlanta. And the truth of the matter is, if you are in the hospitality industry, there is more and more business in the City of Atlanta because more and more people are visiting the city. Hence the record-breaking participation and crowds at the Georgia Aquarium and the impact that is having on other tourist attractions and other hoteliers and restaurateurs, etc. So it seems to me that there is a whole category of work that we have to do around supporting the economy. And supporting that economy, we can help people who are at the low end of the socioeconomic level. And I'll leave that for a moment. Now, we are also an unusual city in that there are one or two other cities in the country that are less than 25% of their metro area, the population relationship. In other words, there are very few cities where the primary city is less than 25% of the overall population. Atlanta is 10% at best of the population of the metro area. And we are unusual in that regard. We found that out when Bain and Company did a tremendous amount of research for us. And as such, there are some natural tensions between the services we are required to provide for a population that basically is 90% of the population that has access to the city, and we're not complaining about that. Rather, we are supporting those services with 10% of the population. The financial model doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's like any other business, in this case, public sector business. Somehow or another, we have to increase our ability to have revenue from other sources than our tax base. The first time I made the speech, the headline was wonderful. All of us on the financial side loved it. Everyone else hated it. It said the city needs to increase its budget by 40%, or $250 million. And I know the reporters don't write the headlines, and no one here writes headlines, right? Most people hated the headline. I loved it. I loved it because it was dramatic enough to get people to do what the speech was intended to do, which is to have people talk about the financing model. With a weak headline, we would not have had as much conversation. We would not have had the second and third stories to explain now the headline. So we were thrilled with the headline because it put us in a situation that allowed us to have a real conversation about money. And we believe when we started in 2002, not only were we short of funds, which has been pointed out time and time again, but not only were we short of funds, we also didn't know how much anything cost. We didn't know how much the service cost. How much does it cost to deliver a particular service? We did not have any metrics on what level of service we should be providing. We were guessing. So now we have a whole system internal to government that allows us to track our services, our cost of services, our delivery time, our quality of service. You may not know it, but we routinely have customer surveys, blind surveys, not by ourselves, but by the University of Georgia, calling customers, our customers, 600 of them, registered voters, blind, no involvement with the city. What do you think about what the city is doing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like any other business would do. And that has allowed us to understand what our customers are thinking about, at the same time understanding what the costs are. Now, I was wrong when I gave the first quote, which was $74. It's actually annualized about $7,400 to $7,700 per acre to maintain parkland. That's what it costs. We didn't know that before. Now, how many of you like the Beltline project? A few of you. Every acre that we gain with the Beltline project requires an investment of somewhere around $7,000. Let's just say you think there's waste. So let's just round it down instead of rounding it up. We will forget gasoline cost and equipment, increase in the cost of labor, etc. We'll round it down to $7,000. But if we add 1,900 acres, 1,500 acres, 1,000 acres of parkland, we have to invest at least $7,000 per acre per year so that you can use the parkland. Otherwise, it's going to be overgrown, undersodded, and completely littered with trash. We didn't know that when we started. Now, you roll all those numbers up, and it's about $250 million a year. So it's a big number. Sorry. I don't like little numbers anyway. I mean, if you're going to go after something, you might as well go after for what you really need instead of talking about how to skimp by and be second class. I'd much rather be first class, a first-class city. So we rolled all those numbers up. 50% of that $250 million, as has been reported, is required for us to meet certain federal, state, and accounting standards. And that's an estimate on what it's going to cost us to fully fund our pension and fully fund our medical liability for our retirees. So about 50% of it is that. A percentage of it is required to replace equipment. We had a wonderful, wonderful plan in the late 90s, which I've shared with this table. The city of Atlanta issued bonds and bought all new fire trucks and all new fire engines the same year, which means they're all aging at the same time, and we have no replacement fund. Minor problem, but you can't have a decent fire department if you don't have equipment, so that equipment is beginning to age. About half of our fire stations, 17 of 34, need complete overhaul and repair. These are buildings that are beginning to fall down around us, so there's some capital cost in that. In addition to which, when I came to the city of Atlanta in the 1970s, and there are a few people who are old enough to have been here then, when I came in the 1970s, the city was basically a city that in the evening there were a few activities, a few nighttime activities, a few dinners, an occasional, you got the picture? People went home in dark. In Atlanta today, in the metro area, people come out of their houses at dark. We have moved from being a 12, 14, 18-hour city to much closer to being a 24-hour city. When I left office with Andy Young and Maynard Jackson in 1991, we had slightly over 1,500 police officers. When I came back 10 years later, in 2002, we had 1,470-odd police officers. In that 10 years, the city changed, became more urban, more cosmopolitan, more demands for services. So a portion of the funds that we need are around the issue of public safety, fire, police services, and all of the support services that are necessary. We are slightly over 1,700 officers today. And you will not believe this unless you were there. But when I was running for office, the question was, how many officers does Atlanta have? And no one would answer the question, including the former president of the council, including the mayor, and the police chief. So one of the innovations we've brought is transparency to tell you what we know. Just a minor point, but since you are press and some of you covered that pretty systematically in the 1990s, I thought I would just mention it. The facts are that we need to get at least to 2,000 police officers. And there's much talk about what Giuliani did or didn't do. Let me tell you two things that are not routinely reported about what happened in New York during Mayor Giuliani's term. Indeed, he did take a different approach to policing. There's no question about that. But in addition to that, he committed to affordable housing, which allowed police officers and other folks to live in the city in excess of 5,000 to 6,000 to 7,000 new units of housing. In addition to that, he hired 1,000 additional officers every single year that he was in office. Now, mind you, he already had 20,000 sworn officers. But he actually moved the needle, not just by setting policy, but by investing in public safety in a brand new way. So the results were not just a policy shift. The results were an investment in the men and women who were on the streets every single day in New York City during that period. Somehow Atlanta has got to move beyond this 17,000 numbers of police officers. And Tom Johnson asked me when I came in, what would it take? Well, it's going to take about a $20 to $30 million annual investment to get there. That's to keep the pay competitive. That's to do the recruitment. That's to pay all of the pension liabilities and the medical liabilities. That's what it's going to cost, and all of the equipment that is necessary. So you add that number. And then I happen to believe that Atlanta has enjoyed a tremendous success with economic development, if not the city nearby. And there is online a report that we have produced. I see Sonia smiling. This is a report from the Atlanta Development Authority For the first time, we have set standards. We've said exactly what we would accomplish by 2009. And what you will see in this report that we are on track in some areas, we are behind in some, and in fact, we are ahead in some. So for instance, we predicted that we could, through aggressive recruitment, retention, and investment, increase the number of jobs in the city limits by 60,000 by the end of 2009. In 2005, we added 1,800 new jobs. So we are only 3% to goal. But if you look at the airport area and airport-related jobs, we predicted that we would add 24,000 jobs. And in fact, we have exceeded that. And we're at 113% of the goal. In terms of property values, we said we'd add $26 million in value, and we've added $1 billion in value, and we've added only $3 billion. Affordable housing, we said we'd add 10,000 units with city incentives, and we've reached our goal by 16%. In crime rate, we said that we would reduce to 5,600 crimes per 100,000 residents, and indeed we are at 36% of the goal. High school graduation and the airport jobs are the only two places that we've hit our goals. High school graduation was at 72%, and we hit that goal last year. And parks and green space, we said we'd add 1,900 new acres of land, and we've added 92 acres of land, or 5% of the goal. Well, the importance is that we are now measuring what we do in concrete terms and holding ourselves accountable to those goals and benchmarks. So everything that we're doing is being driven by these benchmarks and by our research. So in order to get to a first-in-class city, which is what people say they want from Atlanta, that's what the media says they want, that's what the average everyday person says that they want, that's what we believe we need to move toward. We think we need to increase the budget over a period of time by 40%. And not all of that is new staff. The new staff comes in very particular areas like public safety and parks maintenance, but does not necessarily we do not believe we need to expand the support staff in a commensurate way. Now, how do we get there? I'll go back, and I'm really going to close on this because I know you wanted me to answer your question more to hear me talk. But how do we get there? Well, the great cities of America get there 2 or 3 different ways. The great cities of America, pick your favorite, get a substantial amount of money from the federal government by aggressively marketing themselves for federal grants, low-interest loans, etc. The city of Atlanta has just started to do that. The great cities in America get significant funding. For instance, Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia, all these big cities fund their after-school programs, if not in total, in large part with federal grants. The city of Atlanta, we fund our after-school programs with private philanthropy and city dollars. So that is a clear area. The great cities of America have been very, very aggressive about federal funds around Homeland Security. And they use the Homeland Security funds to train their police officers and also to attract the best and brightest who are now interested not just in beat patrol, but also the high security areas. The city of Atlanta has yet to get significant funding in that area. The great cities of America also get funding from their state governments. And whenever I say that, people say to me, well, you don't think that's possible. I say, well, it's possible in Montana. It happens in Iowa. It happens in Illinois. It happens in New York. It may not happen on my watch. But I believe that ultimately it will happen in Georgia. And I don't mean just for the city of Atlanta. I mean for all cities and towns. And indeed, depending on where you are in the United States, if you're in Wyoming, you get about 45% of your general operating funds come from the state of Wyoming, if you're a city and town. If you are in New York, it may be as much as 10 or 15 or 20 or 30%. The average contribution from state funding, and I'm going to answer the question, why would they do that, in a few minutes. But the average is 15%. The states at the lowest end of that 15%, of that continuum of 50 states, are Georgia and Louisiana at 3 and 2%, somewhere in that range. Now, I've had great fun with that statistic, because I hear from people all the time, you need to hire more police officers, you need to do that and that, you need to do what Giuliani did. See, they're counting that I don't know what Giuliani did when they send those emails. I actually have read all of that and studied it. Indeed, there was a tremendous investment in New York to drive the crime stats down. So ultimately, we need to look at the financing model, the formula for the cities and towns of Georgia. Now, why would state government do that? States around the country have done it because most of the money that goes into the state coffers come from cities and towns, from the people who live in cities and towns, whether it's personal income tax, whether it's business license fees, most of the money, whether it's sales tax, most of the money comes out of cities and towns. So most states in the country have decided that it is wise to invest where their money is generated. We are unusual in that is not the case in the state of Georgia. Now, I'm not mad with anybody about it. I just thought I would point it out. You know, as a business model, as you want to hold me accountable for best practices, I thought I would just tell you what best practices are for funding cities and towns and around America. That is a best practice. Will it happen? I have no idea. It's not my job to necessarily do anything at this point other than to raise the issue. So that's a second source of funding. The third source of funding, and this is not in any particular order because the third is really first. When we came into office, we found $40 million in savings. We continued to find savings. The number exceeds $75 million in annualized savings that we have found as a result of research, increasing productivity, changing the way we operate. We believe that we need to go back and find at least 10%. So on a city budget of $600 million, we think there's at least $60 million in savings. And certainly that's where we ought to start. Those are the kinds of discussions that I think this community needs to begin to have if we are looking out into the future beyond today and tomorrow and beyond my term, which ends at the end of 2009. Who's counting? But the fact of the matter is, if Atlanta and Georgia are going to continue to grow and to continue to prosper, we need to begin to look at innovative ways to support the economy and the successes within the state, whether they are downstate or whether they're in metro Atlanta. So it seems to me that now is a perfect time for me as a two-termer in the second term to raise the question about the elephant in the room, which is how does the city of Atlanta, with a 20% poverty level, continue to support the economic activity of an entire region with an old-fashioned funding model? That is the proposition. That's why I raised it. So having said that, I am excited about this year. We have at least 3 initiatives that are worthy of repeating. We had a major initiative around homelessness, which many of you are familiar with. The Gateway Center opened about 18 months ago. That center has served in the first year over 6,000 different people, men, women, and children. Their resources are stretched. They will admit that. The United Way and the Union Mission and all of the other service providers have done a great job of providing a network of services. But we need to continue to invest in transitional housing, subsidized supportive housing for those people who are going to need a subsidy for the rest of their lives. And in fact, the studies show that Atlanta exceeds the national average of people who are not going to be self-sufficient. When we looked at, and I didn't do this study, again, this was United Way and surrounding governments, we found that the national standard is 10%. In Atlanta, it's about 20%. So there are going to be a group of people among the homeless who are going to require a subsidy for a long, long time. We can even act like they're not there, or we can do something about it. And then the vast majority are people who need a leg up of some kind. They need a hand from us. They don't need a handout. They need a hand up. And sometimes it's as simple as a down payment on a property, or the first and last month's rent. They can pay it weekly or monthly. They cannot afford to make the deposit that is necessary. And the only way you can find that out is to interact not with a group of people, but one-on-one through a case management basis, and that's what the Gateway is attempting to do. The second is obviously the Beltline. The Beltline is a transformative project. It's a project that will define how we live, work, how we move around the city. I am fully in support of it, and we're kicking off our capital campaign tomorrow, headed by Jim Kennedy, Phil Kent, Ray Weeks, and Herman Russell. And our goal is to, in a very short period of time, get pledges and contributions of $60 million that will allow us to continue that and really start the land acquisition. And then third, and not certainly not least, is this whole opportunity for us to embrace our history around human rights and civil rights, and to build a civil rights, human rights center, which we believe is perfectly compatible with our overall goals to promote tourism and business travel, which are the underpinnings of much of the economic activity in Atlanta. And we believe that that has been advanced very much so by the acquisition of the King Papers, as well as the donation of the Coca-Cola Company, and the very real interest on the part of the corporate community and the philanthropic community in telling the Atlanta story through the eyes of human and civil rights, and continuing that effort through the programs of such a center. So those are three very distinct initiatives that we are excited about, and we are urging people to make contributions. And those contributions can obviously be money, but in addition to that, we need the contributions of your vocal support, as well as your contributions of any collectible items that you might have that fit in the realm of human and civil rights. Atlanta has decided that it wants to be great. In 1895 at the Cotton States Exposition, we declared ourselves then the jewel of the South, the cultural, educational, and business center of the South. 30 years after the Civil War, we said Atlanta is going to be on the map, and we're going to make it so. The investments since then are along a continuum that I believe that we need to continue. And I'm very excited about the next 3 years, more excited about the next 10 and 20 years, in part because I'll be watching, but also because I think the momentum is such that we were going to continue to have great things happen in Atlanta for a long, long time. Thank you very much, and I'm open for questions. No. Sure.
Why not?
Because it's under investigation, and when the investigation is complete, we'll be glad to share the findings.
Good afternoon, Mayor Franklin. It's reported that U.S. Airways has increased their offer for Delta Airlines, and Delta is certainly a very important part of this community, and certainly a big important part of the growth of the airport here, which is the center of economic activity. So, how does the city
Well, the City of Atlanta, the Chamber of Commerce, Delta Airlines, lots of other people, all of us have put our heads together. We're very, very anxious to do what we can to support Delta as they work through their bankruptcy. This is a very complicated issue, and I don't pretend to know all sides of it. What I do know, however, is that the airport has close to a $20 billion annual impact on the Metro Atlanta economy. Some of that is statewide, but most of it is in the metropolitan Atlanta area. And I also know that Delta has 25,000 employees who live in Metro Atlanta, who are not just working for Delta, but are involved in the day-to-day lives of their communities and contributors to their communities. So I have concluded, the City Council has passed a resolution. I have concluded that it is in our best interest to support Delta in any way that we can. And that support has largely been a vocal support in using the bully pulpit. We don't have anything else that we can give that they believe would be helpful. And I've asked that question directly to Delta executives. So we are continuing to take the same position. I have talked with members of the Congress who represent Atlanta and Georgia and have made that plain. I heard Senator Chambliss say very much the same thing that I've said at the Chamber of Commerce annual luncheon a few weeks ago in December. So it seems that we seem to be aligned on a bipartisan way to support Delta in any way that we can through their bankruptcy. It is a footnote to that is Ben DaCosta, who is the general manager at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, is indeed intimately involved in this because he's a non-voting member of the committee, the bankruptcy committee that is engaged. And he is one of 2 airport managers nationwide who are on that committee. So we are following the case very closely. Yes. Yes.
I was going to ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you over there. Short like me.
I am. I have a question. I wanted to know if you're familiar with the pilot program that was included in the Transportation Equity Act in 1996 that would have allowed the rest areas in Georgia to market instead of only become an area where people can, right now the federal government says you can only go to the bathroom there and vend. We were, through Newt Gingrich, allowed through the Transportation Equity Act to begin to do more. We would have been a pilot program. We would have been able to stop some of the tourists on their way to Florida to try to get them to do more in Atlanta. That pilot program really has stalled, and I would think that would be a great innovative program to allow all the rest areas in Georgia to sell Georgia goods, to sell tickets to things in Atlanta and all around, and I wondered if you knew about that.
Don't know about it. Sounds like a great idea. We'll write it down. See if we can follow up. Got a lot of questions.
You spoke about what the state might do for the city long term. Could you talk about what the city wants the state to do in this legislative session?
Well, the city has had we've actually had good relationships with the state over the last 5 years, and the state did the biggest single thing that they could do for us, I believe, in my 8-year term, which was allow us the opportunity to have a sales tax referendum around water and sewer. That was the top 20 of my initiative. As far as I was concerned, number one to number 20 was to get some mechanism to fund water and sewer improvements. So there's hardly anything else related to that. Of that magnitude. We obviously, last year, we were able to increase some of our fines and fees. We, as the president of the Georgia Municipal Association, we have strong feelings about annexation, our ability to annex without interference from other jurisdictions. But that's a statewide initiative, and we are on board with that as well. We don't have nearly as aggressive plan for state government as we've had in the past, like water and sewer. I think the 3rd year I was in office, we asked the state to abolish the traffic court. You might remember that, when we merged the courts. And that was another one that was pretty important to us, because in the combination or merger of those courts, we anticipate somewhere between $8 and $10 million in annual savings. So we're back on the hunt, is the real answer to the question. We're looking for those kinds of substantive issues, and we don't have that kind of issue before the General Assembly at this point.
Time for one more question.
Mayor, you are in a really remarkable situation. You are very popular in the city. You have built great respect in the region. You're now very nationally recognized. You have your programs underway, and what you think is a very successful way for a lot to be accomplished. What factors will you weigh concerning a decision about a third term, and by when will you make that decision?
I've made that decision, Tom. You're late. I'm a two-termer. I have a two-term limit. I have no anticipation that there would be any way for me to run for a third term. And I know mayors who've been in office 12 and 16 years, and some of them are great, and some of them aren't so great. I just think I'll just thank my lucky stars that it looks like we're going to end the term in 2009 with the kinds of investments that are going to be good for Atlanta long term, and I'll be satisfied that will be enough for me. I mean, I can't imagine a third term. As a matter of fact, it might cause a nightmare. My nightmare. Maybe yours too. I don't know. You have been very generous with your time. I mean, I believe that the press and the media are a partner. There is no way for Atlanta to tell its story effectively without the media and the press. And I probably am one of the most lenient, thick-skinned elected officials you'll ever find. I don't worry about it. You tell your side of the story, I tell my side of the story. The better I am at telling my side of the story, the better you are at perhaps getting it the way I think is best. So I appreciate the Press Club, all of its members, for the hard work you do every day, and believe that you are a substantial partner in the success that we've had. People would not know about sewers today if you didn't tell the story. It's true. People would not know about sewers today if you did not tell the story. If you did not hold us accountable, whether it is for an infraction on our part or for our spending levels or for our attendance at meetings, etc., people would not know what government was up to. So that is a sincere compliment to you and a thank you to you for the job that you do, those of you in the media and the press, each and every day. It matters to us that you cover Atlanta. It matters to us that you care about Atlanta, and we look forward to working with you for the next 5 years. I meant 3 years. I'll be there 3 years. Thank you.